Our next panel, the fifth session, Dialogue on Social Enterprise, Unleashing Systemic Change. If the panelists would join me on the stage, please. Professor Francis Davis, whom you saw earlier on, the UK's Ministerial Advisor on Inclusive Enterprise. Also, Khalid Awan, Chairman of the Transum Group. Leading this conversation will be our moderator, Faraz Khan, who's the CEO and co-founder of Seed. Gentlemen, please. Once again, we'll do a conversation amongst the panel and perhaps a few questions from the floor at the end.
My name is Faraz Khan, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Seed Ventures. With me on the panel today are two eminent personalities. When I say eminent, there's a lot of meaning and work and history and performance associated to it. On my left, I've got Mr. Khalid Awan. He is an entrepreneur and a businessman who has created a household brand name of the magnitude that very few exist in Pakistan in a very short span of time. I was just talking to him earlier, and he did mention that through his distribution network, he touches at least 1 million individuals daily. So I think a round of applause for something like that is absolutely well deserved. On my right, I've got Professor Francis Davis. Francis is a professor at University of St. Mary's and at University of Birmingham. He is also a ministerial advisor to the British government on social inclusion, innovation, and disability. And recently, Francis launched the Center of Social Innovation and Global Public Policy. And at the launch, we had the Harvard University as well. And the whole idea is to actually bring in academia and the other stakeholders like private sector and the government together in a space that actually creates social innovation for the urban-rural new landscapes. Today's topic is something very close to my heart personally. There are a lot of words in it. There's social enterprise, there is a dialogue, but systematic change and the quality of that change is something that is, we've heard snippets of that through Nadeem Hussain Saab's talk as well. Earlier, Engro was here as well. We had Telenor. But a systemic change that is ingrained in the philosophy of the institution. And we have far moved away from the annual report glorification stage where corporates and private sectors used to actually just support an initiative because they need to seem good. They need to look good in front of their stakeholders. We have far moved away, especially in Pakistan. How we can actually move forward with this thought process in a way that the challenges that Pakistan's BOP market in urban and rural areas that are facing these days, like health, education, financial literacy, financial inclusion, we've got two very important stakeholders, academia and business. Academia is a great supply source of youth and talent in a landscape. A private sector enterprise, a business, absorbs and creates through their supply and distribution network. So my first question is to Khalid Awan Saab. Khalid Saab, the wonderful success of TCS and your other ventures recently, the distribution network that you have, how have you inculcated a systemic change for social innovation in and across your organizations, recently or historically? It'd be great to actually have your views on that.
Thank you, Faraz, for a very generous introduction. I think I'll go right to the heart of the matter, and that is that, when you have an enterprise that has got a lot of stakeholders and is benefiting a lot of people, then there is a very natural kind of energy within that enterprise. And I think that ensures its perpetuity and its integrity. So basically, one of the major success factors of my business has been that very early in the business, we created, instead of employees, we created self-entrepreneurship within the business. So many of the people who come to deliver the service to you at your doorsteps, most of them are self-employed. And in that, it is their own business. And because it is their own business, so there is a different kind of a spirit.
True. So you mean to say that once you introduce the concept of entrepreneurship, the quality of your business and its success, that improved along with the livelihoods of those individuals as well? And was that a very structured thought process that this is how you're going to do it? Or was it that you learned, you didn't realize it, but you learned from the market that that's the best way moving forward?
Frankly speaking, it evolved. And it's only that, when it got to a certain size that you realized that the benefit of it. Initially, it was a simple solution because instead of monitoring overtimes and instead of the other allowances and everything, why not tell a person that, all right, this is his cost to the company, and this is the business that he brings, and give him a simple formula for and then he'll just go out and bring more.
Great. Now that brings me to Francis. Francis, your first visit to Pakistan?
First visit to Pakistan.
So you did realize that we are much more than camels and hijabs?
I didn't know anything about camels, but yeah, absolutely.
So you have seen an extremely evolved space in terms of social innovation. You're part of it, from the government perspective as well as from the academia. You've had great interactions with a lot of stakeholders over here. What is the difference that you see in the way the government and the academia is pursuing the social innovation space and enterprise space in the UK compared to what's happening in Pakistan?
So, I mean, what it seems like based on my initial experience is that there's a discipline that comes from scarcer resources for people here to take the entrepreneurial step faster and to focus in more speedily on some of the pressing social challenges. One of the challenges back in mainland Europe is that people might default to saying, if I see an educational challenge before me, I'll wait 5, 10, 15 years until the government department for X sorts it out. And so the incentive structures are all wrong in that sense. Okay. Whereas perhaps if that specific obstacle isn't there, the space is more open.
Right. And keeping technology in view, everyone is talking about the rapid change of technology. There's a gentleman by the name of Farhan, and while I was just putting down these pointers, he actually mentioned that, but technology is changing rapidly. So if you actually bring in a social innovation and enterprise model, keeping a kind of technology in mind, but in 3 months or 6 months or a year's time, it goes redundant. How do you cater for that?
I don't think technology will ever get redundant. Technology only evolves, and it becomes better and better. So, but I think one way of explaining this is that you have, in the space of the social entrepreneurship, you have a large number of people who constitute, say the people who are below the poverty line, let's put it that way. And because they are below the poverty line, there will be a lot of things that they will not be able to afford to buy. And yet there are a number of, they have demands and they have needs that need to be fulfilled. Now, to reaching out to a vast number of people and connecting them and the opportunities around them to the mainstream economy, what you need is a linkage.
Right.
And that linkage has now come in the shape of technology. Because technology reaches out, and technology also gives you a two-way feedback on whatever the process is. And that has made a lot of things possible. Huge opportunities have opened up in that space of social entrepreneurship. And these opportunities will actually, I think, transform our future world. Immense.
There's a particular question, and from the UK perspective, I would like to actually take your feedback as well. But financial inclusion, financial literacy, through a distribution network like TCS, these are two challenges. Pakistan's, I think, more than 85% of the population do not have bank accounts. Now, it's a great challenge, but at the same time, it's a huge opportunity as well. Do you see that organizations and institutions like yourself playing a part in that bottom of the pyramid, urban, rural segments where there are unbanked populations, to bring them in the system?
Absolutely. I think we just had a session before this. There is a, you see, the spectrum of opportunity in which financial inclusion is just one part, is a very major enabler. There has to be first a connectivity. You got to be able to reach out and inform the people of a service, also get their needs assessment, and then find a fulfillment mechanism. How do you fulfill those in a cost-effective manner? And in many cases, some of the businesses that we have seen, you can provide additional value addition to the traditional models of needs, because the same technology channel enables you to inject one or two other services also, or benefits to them. And that is why I think the great enterprises of the future will be around this. There is, a long time ago I read, and this is about nearly a decade ago, and that the size of the opportunity around the bottom of the pyramid globally is the size of something like $5 trillion globally. Now, this is the opportunity that needs to be tapped. What we need to do is how do we reach out to them, and what new models. And also, we can't do everything. It won't all happen in one go. It will be a process that will, will be over a few decades.
Absolutely, makes sense. Francis, health and education. How do you see, keeping the UK perspective in mind, looking at the Pakistani market, that dissemination and distribution of health and health-related products and services, as well as education-related products and services, could be disseminated in markets like Pakistan, in rural markets where the access of these two fundamental basic rights are not available? So do you see there are technologies that could be scaled up in Pakistan through perhaps your center?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we're going to be working on the centre is concrete solutions. So students doing the programmes will be expected to invent new responses to bottom of the economic pyramid challenges on the way through the programme. And if they don't, they're not going to be able to graduate. And to a large extent, so they won't be able to graduate from the programme unless they've invented a solution. And that mirrors some of the developments at Ivy League schools. It seems to me the potential around universities is to consciously construct them as what I call social Silicon Valleys, where we're combining capital, the supply of huge talent coming from those institutions, the reach to their alumni, and then to the communities in which they're rooted. Because if you had a distribution network like the one we were hearing about earlier, with 1 million contacts a day, and you had a health problem where the key challenge was being reminded to take your medication, not that you hadn't got your medication, then essentially you can use that as a distribution network for reminders, in the same way that you can use the technology to be able to do that incredibly cost effectively. And think of how that might then apply in sub-Saharan Africa, where there are big challenges around HIV and people being reminded to take their medication. So creating those social Silicon Valleys to unleash that energy to provide new routes and new pathways to the ground floor seem to me to be essential. Yeah.
Great. Now, I know that money is, well, some say that money is limited, and some say that money is available. For all the good and for all the social enterprises, access to funds, be it impact funds, angel funds, seed funds, growth funds, PE funds. Khalid sir, do you see a need for such interventions by conventional commercial investors as well as impact investors in the country? And probably the answer would be yes, but it has not happened to that pace. What are the reasons you think that we can actually dilute those reasons and actually bring in more local as well as foreign investments in this particular space, be it impact or be it conventional commercial investments?
My experience is that funding is not the problem because a large number of very big funds around the world are waiting for the right kind of business model, to absorb it and take it up. The challenge is twofold. First is the conceptualization of the new business model,
right?
Really working, and that you may have to, break down a lot of old conventions in doing that. And the most successful models will be that work around the need of the common man, the man on the street, or the man or the farmer in the village deep down, because those are the things that have the maximum impact. Once you have worked out a model, the second thing is you need the enabling technology to be able to do that. And you'll be surprised that sometimes when you start on a journey like this, new avenues open up which you haven't even thought about. I mean, there was just as a very current example is that my company was asked by the Punjab Health Department for providing certain services to the health sector. And that was really, basically, it meant delivering or ensuring that the medical supplies across the many hundreds of hospitals that they have, the medical supplies level is maintained. And so there's supply chain, Once we did it, the customer, the government, came back to us with a very different thing than what they'd actually set up. They said, can you please man our pharmacies? Right. I said, well, we are in the business of transportation, not manning the pharmacies. Because they discovered that there was the big leakage of medicines at that level, the hospital staff or the hospital pharmacist and the local the shopkeepers and all. There was a lot of leakage there. And once we went and we took over a few, they saw immediate benefits of that. So anyway, what we need, even for us to be successful long term, we'll need a very good system of inventory management, of ensuring that we have visibility on what happens and what happens to the medicines and the disbursements. So the space is immense. And and the models will evolve, I think, around every new business.
So you mean to say there is no dearth of funding? The money is available,
oh, yes,
subject to the fact that the process and there is proof of concept that it works.
Yes, it works.
So the quality of that particular social enterprise business model will automatically draw the kind of money it's needed to scale up. Yes?
I think where there can be a challenge is that when large corporates have had a very kind of conservative and traditional charitable approach to corporate social responsibility, and they're then asked to turn that into social venture capital, that if it's the same people doing it, they can still they don't quite take it seriously because that was in the charitable part of their life before that wasn't very professional. And what's new about the new wave is that they're incredibly professional. And one of the really interesting questions that I think they're asking in some countries is, how can corporates join a buy social campaign so that there's not only a supply of investment capital at that end, but that when you're buying your soap, you choose to buy it from a venture owned and run by people who had nothing before, or owned and run by disabled people when you buy your toilet paper or your other supplies, as a conscious purchasing decision, so that you create new social markets for these new and growing and scaling organizations to be able to enter at more speed.
Right.
So a Pakistani Buy Social campaign would be one way to replicate what's been tried in some other places.
Well, I think one thing we comprehensively agree on is that Pakistan is a very giving society in terms of philanthropy and charities, zakat, and these are the integral parts of the society. It's all about actually how to channelize and structure these givings into more well-governed and impactful streams. I wanted to ask you about the interventions of the government in the UK sphere towards the social innovation and enterprise space, that how the government has become a conduit and supporter, and how successful it has been, if it has, in developing the ecosystem side of it.
It's provided one or two central grants to umbrella bodies who act as catalysts, and that's been very successful. It's introduced a specific piece of legislation which requires all government procurement to be tested against the number of jobs in excluded groups that it creates when that government money is spent, which creates a framework into which organizations owned and run by particularly poor neighborhoods can compete. And so that's a new feature. I think in terms of central government and its own behaviors, it's been a pretty abject failure. And that's one of the things that we're working on at the central level. If the Department for Work, which is responsible for getting disabled and other people back into work, has 48 restaurants on its estate, but it never occurred to those restaurants to employ anybody from a background that may never have had access to work before, then something systemically has gone wrong, and that needs to be cracked open. But at the local level is where the best examples have come from. And where that's happened is where particular regions or mayors or local economic agencies have said, we want to declare ourselves a social enterprise or social innovation capital or path beta or zone, and try and mobilize university skills, input capital and purchasing in a cluster, kind of Michael Porter style, to unlock more with less.
Right. Now, don't want to put you on the spot, Khalid Saab, but I'll ask the question in a more generic manner, that what are the opportunities that you see for the government to get involved in this space?
Government to get involved in what way? In doing business?
In the social
The
enterprise
government
space.
can only be an enabler. I think the best thing is the government is to basically stay out of these spaces and just enable. These will be actually driven as a result of the economic needs, the social change of the society, you know. And as I said, these are the needs. And I just want to mention that many years ago, I once had the opportunity to listen to a lecture by a very eminent world economist called Professor Prahlad. He was an Indian economist. He was Indian American, and he wrote a book, Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid.
Yeah, I've read that. Yes.
Now, at that time, he had come to an event, and that was an event which was sponsored by the United Nations Secretary General in New York. And that was that when they had identified the Millennium Development Goals and poverty alleviation and some of the other goals that they had, they wanted to involve the businesses also. So the UN called a kind of a conclave of three different segments. One was the civil society, the business, and the governments. And in which the businesses said at that time that these big, large enterprises, these social enterprises, since we are businesses, we will not be able to sustain them because by definition, we have to be profit-driven. And to which Professor Prahlad replied that, and that's where I think this also came out, this big size of the opportunity. He says that there's such a large number of people at that bottom of the pyramid that although their needs are not in terms of the value are not high, but the sheer size of that,
volume,
the scale of that makes it viable for many large businesses to be set up on this premise. So I think, so the government, if you were to ask me what I think what we need to do is some of the very critical sectors of our economy, education, healthcare, I think, and poverty alleviation, and it's just that to create an enabling environment and see that there's a level playing field for everybody. I think that's what they can do.
So when you say an enabling environment, then at the policy level, at the legislation level, at the taxation level, there needs to be a shift towards social enterprise legislation, like probably in the UK. There is no legislation, but there is a specific section in which you can register a social enterprise and actually get subsidies, but it's a for-profit business with impact quantification.
The problem that occurs is that when you're doing something at that scale and you're doing something with a new business model, there'll be some law somewhere from the old statutes, that will come and say that thing is not possible.
Right.
And that government department responsible for the enforcement of that particular thing will come onto you with a ton of bricks, and completely either stop the business or finish the business. For example, one of the things that in my industry, there is a law that when you transport anything that is imported, then the driver of the vehicle who is carrying something that is imported should have on him the import documents of that particular thing, unless he has to show that this particular thing that he's carrying in his van or something has been imported, duty has been paid. So that is fine. But when you are moving to the scale now, when you're moving thousands of items, and it is not possible, and at the scale and the time lines that have now become shrunken because of the needs of the economy.
Right.
It is not possible unless you revise these. Technology has made it possible for you to still capture all that data and have it available, but you have to change the laws for doing that. So this is one of the many examples in which, our new e-commerce companies, for example, are having an issue because some of our very good e-commerce produce that is now there's a demand for it overseas. Those vendors are not getting export rebate on that, and they're actually having to pay sale tax as if it's because the government has to be moving a little ahead, a little forward, engage with the industry, create and that's what I meant by creating an enabling environment.
Sounds good.
I think one thing where legislation to allow or permit or make possible distinctive legal forms can be really helpful is in making sure that the hybrid business forms that grow in the social enterprise space continue to provide public benefit. And the experience in many countries is that social enterprise language, kind of hybrid sources of activity can be used to mobilize external international cash or local cash. And then when one gets down to audit level, discovers that they're existing for private benefit.
Right.
And the good thing about creating a new legal form is that you can crack that open, make it more transparent, and then require of the venture proper social audits to be able to demonstrate their public benefit so that everybody knows that their zakat or their social investment is really going for public benefit and not private benefit.
But do you recognize that the social enterprise space, being so, like in terms of a structured model, it is very new? So the impact quantification methodologies or audits are quite a few in the market at this point of time, but they vary. They don't address the local needs and challenges of impact quantification, let's say, of a village in Turkey compared to one in probably Coventry. So, there's a lot of gap in terms of impact quantification even.
Well, we had the Association of Chartered and Certified Accountants on this morning, and I was talking to the chief exec, and she was talking about the research they're doing. There's a really important piece of work to be done there in international accounting standards, because there's been this absolute industry created of social impact reporting, right? But there's no industry in creating social impact management accounting for the poor managers in the ventures trying to create the value. Now, if you put me back in charge of a private sector company where I got audited at the end of the year on a set of external criteria, none of which I'd been able to manage throughout the year because my business isn't set up in management accounting terms, I would laugh at the audit. So there's a really important piece there for CSR finance functions for the accounting profession to come up with a social standard, which they then sign off like they do with all the other reporting standards.
Right. In the UK, Khalid Saab, there is, in terms of the consumer level, there is an absolute consciousness towards any brand one buys, in terms of its ethical behavior, in terms of where their investments are going, and where their raw materials are coming. And that actually has a direct impact on the bottom line. Do you think that in Pakistan, we are close, far, or nowhere in sight of that particular state, that where the consumers would actually decide that this company, because it's doing good, apart from the fact that they've got a good product, a set of products and services, that factor would play into the purchasing? Do you think we're anywhere close in sight in that particular environment?
I think we are at a different stage of maturity. We don't have that much competitive companies vying with each other in that space. And if somebody is fulfilling a need, the consumer doesn't really have much of a choice but to buy those products.
Right.
But of course, I think national companies should pursue a kind of ethics within themselves, that they are mindful, they are respectful of the local cultures and of all the sensitivities that are there, and do it in a manner, perform their duties in a manner that is that does justice to everybody's, whatever their beliefs are or whatever. So it shouldn't clash with them in any way, socially or otherwise.
So coming back to that thing that the consumers do have a choice, and they are conscious enough that they can impact the bottom line of a business in case they don't see that company doing good beyond their products and services.
That's why the companies go all the way to posturing themselves as good corporate citizens.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Just quickly within that, within the overall bottom of the economic pyramid, Prahalad's bottom of the economic, there are also market niches. So one of the interesting things we've done in the UK recently is we've valued the spending power of disabled people, and the Treasury estimates that's about £220 billion a year. Then on top of that, there's the global market opportunities, say, around assistive technology that I was referring to this morning. So that spend, even within the overall niche of the bottom, there are niches within the niche. And so what would a purple pound or a purple rupee strategy look like, and how would you seek to unlock the spending power of the 15% of Pakistanis who are disabled within that overall broader thing? So
it would be great if you could actually share the initiative of TCS that has actually brought in an inclusive paradigm to the disabled population and created a stream of work with TCS. Khalid Saab.
We are not there yet at this time to be able to have done a significant thing, but we're definitely positioning ourselves for doing this. One of the models that we developed was that since our services are 24/7 and our some new services have got a lot of mass appeal, and we needed a very large call center. So at one point we decided that instead of having all the call center people coming to a central point, why not that these people can work from home? And so we started a work from home program whereby through an app, anybody who is on that program can put an app on, and we get to know that that person is now available for work. And his laptop links up to our central information platform, which enables him to answer all the questions and all the queries that there may be. And so we've got about 42 people working at this time under this scheme, which was launched about 3-4 months ago. And we are just recruiting another batch of 100 more people. These could be students, but mostly, women, housewives. They could even be retired people, so long as, and the quality of their call is monitored, and they earn at a time of their choosing. They can start working at night, they can start working at the middle of the day, and for as many number of hours as they like. So here, I think we also want to include some of the disabled people, because I was working with a very dear friend of mine who's Amin Ashwani, who has set up an organization for the disabled people, and we thought this is another opportunity that will save them traveling on the roads and just working from home.
Fantastic. And towards the end, I would ask a very cheeky question. And the cheeky question is, there's a new concept in Europe, especially. It's called corporate impact venturing. It basically suggests to a corporate that across your supply and distribution, there could be a new social business that could be developed. And there should be a co-investment model. Like, for instance, if an entity comes to you and say that across your distribution, this is a social business, would you invest into it? And we would invest into it, bring it to a particular level, and then we could see what we could do with it. Do you think that is something that the market is ready for?
I'm not sure whether the market is ready. It depends on how the whole concept is articulated and explained. But so far as we are concerned, we know that this is an age of collaboration. There is no single organization can do everything. That if there's somebody doing something that complements whatever you are doing, and the end customer can benefit from some value addition, then why not? There should be a lot of room for collaboration, and very many new such models you will see emerging very soon, because this is a time when I think we are at the brink of the explosion of the technological possibilities.
Right.
And so I see exciting possibilities ahead, and we are very open to it.
Great. Hey, that's great to know. Just a last question to Francis, yourself, and to Khalid Saab, that the conventional models of aid and donors is changing towards social enterprise investments. How do you see that as a businessman, and how do you see that as an academic? Khalid Saab, you.
I didn't get it very clear.
See, conventionally, there is this philanthropy model in which you give out the money, and that's it.
Yeah.
Now things are changing towards social enterprise investment, that you actually ask to set up a company that does good and makes money as well. So how do you see that as a businessman? A socially conscious businessman?
Yes. I think on that scale, there are a number of examples that even you can see within the country. These are small little seedlings that are emerging and will become very big, provided they are helped and enabled by. Because instead of reinventing the wheel, if the enterprise gets the benefit of a larger organization, that can be, instead of just a financial investor, a strategic investor.
Yeah.
And they can bring a lot of value in terms of their expertise, in terms of technology, marketing, systems, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that should be the thing that should be encouraged.
And thank you for just putting in my company's name, Seedling, into this conversation. Great branding for me.
I think that shift, given that some of the aid money comes at scale,
right,
that shift is a challenge to civil society, which has tended not to seek to professionalize its processes as quickly as some of us might have wanted. And so I think they're frightened of that demand to be entrepreneurial, to deliver financial returns, to be very, very transparent about their social returns. But in turn, that provides a whole set of new opportunities for the private sector, both to partner with those civil society organizations, but also to seek new ways of making value for themselves. One of the most successful management consultancies now working in the development space and social enterprise spaces in Africa is PricewaterhouseCoopers, because they've just seen the shift in this space as a significant business opportunity. And to me, that's good, because it mainstreams from the margins into the mainstream, something which should be just core business.
Great. I'd really like to thank you, Khalid Saab and Francis Davis. And thank you to Asfar and Nutshell Forum to actually have this conversation in space. If there are any questions from the audience, Professor Francis Davis and Khalid Saab, it's available. Yes, sir.
We get a microphone over to the someone with a microphone.
I'm Shahid Zaki. I'm a visiting professor at the IBA and ex-CEO of Philips Pakistan. My question to you all is, we hear so much about corporate social responsibility, the triple bottom line and all that, but very little about corporate shared values, which is a much newer concept. And the objective is to use business opportunity to solve social problems. And in fact, what you can do is you can create much bigger impact, and at the same time, you can make your business gives you better returns. So can you throw some light on that?
Corporate values are very useful, especially for large enterprises, and especially in a business like mine where they were not under one roof. There are people spread all over the country. You don't get to see them every day. So the best thing is to sort of work out a set of values, and those values should be widely known, should be widely debated, should be widely practiced. In our offices, if you go anywhere across the country, you will see a set of values that are on the walls, that are in front of the managers making decisions. And whatever decision they make, and if they are doing it in support of those values and the practice of those values, it is something that they can do anything around that. So I think that they're very important tools for management, for creating a company culture, and we benefited very much from them.
Yeah.
Sharing it with the customers and making sure, because that will help you in creating a better brand, better image.
Absolutely. You see, they say the customer satisfaction begins with the employee satisfaction. You see, if your employee is imbued with the right values, he will practice them. And some of the values should really be the one that you have to respect the customer, you have to listen to what they say, be truthful. So those values practiced within the company then get translated to the customers.
I'm going to overstate a point to make it, if that makes sense. But if one goes to the World Economic Forum, to some of the social enterprise conversations there, they're very often framed in terms of social enterprise is there to re-legitimate capitalism and to save capitalism, given the challenges of the last few years. If one goes to the same sessions at the World Social Forum, the discourse is all around saving the state. And it seems to me there needs to be a much harder piece of work done to build shared values, this is about setting free customers and creating value where value is not being created, which kind of makes both of those two strands a bit less important, if that makes sense. So I think that's where the shared value needs to be developed.
Corporate shared values are basically the fundamental foundation of this new concept of corporate impact venturing as well, that is taking a phenomenal shape in Europe especially, because it's about listening to the customers in your supply and distribution communities and identifying a business opportunity that is a viable value proposition for those customers by solving their challenge, as well as a direct impact on the bottom line of that corporate as well. So yes, I think it's something that is being developed in practical models as well. Yes, sir.
Seems to me that the values conversation is becoming more and more common and more accepted. I mean, we heard Engro this afternoon talking about setting up an entire coal mine. And we can question what the business itself was, but the way they approached the calculus was based upon a values system and a stakeholder approach that is new, not in concept certainly, but in practice. It's sort of gaining a bit more traction. But while the values is being, the values conversation is becoming more common, translating the values into action seems to me to still be extremely problematic. You spoke earlier on about breaking business models. And yet we're not breaking the business models. We're trying to shove the values into existing business models, it would seem. You said there's money available, and I've been to plentiful conferences where it's been exactly as you framed it earlier on. People say there's money, and then people say, I want money, and never the twain shall meet in many cases, because the business model doesn't support a values-based business. We're still using traditional financial metrics, and those who have the money are still just looking for the low-hanging fruit. They don't want to spend too much time thinking about social accounting and finding new ways to justify a viable business. They still want the easy money. So how can we go about creating legal, financial, accounting systems that actually enable the kind of values that we're talking about? In the US, they've now got this B corporation structure, which is a kind of a step towards that thing. But I've not looked at Europe too hard, but from what I understand, the Europeans are not going very far in that direction. Is there not space here? Is there not a necessity to examine that side of the equation?
Well, I think what you're mentioning is it goes down deep into the DNA of a business enterprise. Is a business enterprise there just for the short-term profits, or is it for the long-term sustenance and long-term value creation? And there you got to see that your business, if you will grow with your customers, and the trust and confidence and the trust of your customer is your greatest asset. At how much value they give to your, to your name or to your logo. I mean, these are even much higher values, even in dollar terms, than the economic value that you see on the balance sheets. And I think all serious businesses that have survived over decades, could not have survived had they not been sincere towards the customer. And I think therein lies that as I said, DNA, that has to be right from the top, the mission statement as made by the owners or the board of directors, and made sure that it is practiced down by the management all the way down. That's like a good family practices good values, and everybody, all the children in the family then are known by those standards. Same way as business.
I think there is scope for legislation. B Corp, community interest companies in the UK, some people would use cooperative, and there are particular legal forms in France and Belgium and elsewhere for social purpose. The challenge is that just because you choose a legal firm doesn't necessarily mean that you behave in an ethical and a values-led way. So the same management challenges are there. And in that sense, there's probably a challenge to those of us who recruit, and particularly those of us who teach in business schools, to think through the kind of leaders we're developing and how we're going about it. There's a lovely piece of research at Harvard Business School by Amitai Etzioni, where he does ethical surveys in cohorts of MBA students. And even when they were required to do compulsory ethics courses, the module in their MBA that most shaped their whole outlook for the next 25 years was the finance module. In fact, wiped out almost every other aspect of learning about values beyond cash. So it might even be in the finance module that the argument needs to be most enthusiastically had.
That's absolutely true. I mean, in MBAs, the idea that shareholder value is the only fiduciary duty that a board has is very hard to shake. But my point is a slightly broader one. My point is, where is the capacity for social enterprises to really gain traction? Because at the moment, they don't have the enabling environment and ecosystem to give them that capacity to grow. One, because it's the finance aspect. I mean, it's not a very compelling proposition for a venture fund investor or any investor, or a bank even, to say, you know what, I'm going to stick with a gentleman's profit as my target. I'm going to take 6% or something as my maximum return and plow the rest back into social value projects. Whereas the bank would say, but you could get 15% if you tried harder. And you go, yeah, but do you see what I mean? It's not a great sales line to say, I'm going to limit my profit potential because I believe in giving value to the community.
Alex, I would like to take that, and then I would have
the traction is in the kind of endorsement you'll get from your customers and the environment and the society around you. That is so much beyond those 6% or so bottom line. You see, the accounting systems have to take into account not just the quarterly profits. The accounting systems must take into account the long-term value creation that you are creating in a business. And that is far more. I just want to share an example. I hope I'm not being, just as a learning experience. I once went to see a government minister because of a work that my company had applied for something, and that application was being very much delayed. So I went to see a government minister who was in charge of a cabinet committee to take decision on that. So once I went there, very difficult to first get to the minister. You got to know somebody who knows. So when I went to see, she was a lady minister, and she just told me straight away that, sorry, but because of some government policy, this thing is no longer, we are not going to go ahead with it. So fine, we had a cup of tea. And just as I got up to say goodbye to her, this lady minister, she stood up also from her seat and started walking to the door. And when she was close to the door, she said, I want to tell you something. I have something to say to you. And I said, yes, madam. She says that, you know, a few years ago, I was in a very difficult situation back in the village in which I live. And your company at that time came to my help, and it helped me. And that day, I had vowed to myself that if ever I see you, I will say thank you. And I just want to say thank you to you. Now, I tell you the effect of that goodwill at that level, and people that you don't even know about, I mean, that was far more than what I had not been able to get from there. And that helps you in ways that you do not even, it'll come to your help in many other ways. So I would think let's start valuing business as a covenant with the community and the customers that you serve, long-term businesses.
Taimur,
just one.
yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think just one quick thing is, there is money to be made, and part of the problem is in the business school, there's a default that there is no money to be made, because if you're doing the luxury products course, you're learning about champagne and so on and so forth, without thinking that a large bottle of shampoo is a luxury product in a favela, and could be turned by turning it into sachets into a democratized product. And so there's just something about the whole frame there about how we look at the business models and the preparation and the training.
You're right. There's a very strong element of truth of what you said. Now, I'm putting my hat of seed investor. We invest in social enterprises. Like Khalid Saab said earlier, that unless and until a product or a service or a model is proven and it can achieve scale, there is reluctance from the established distribution networks and investors, because it's patient capital. Right now, there are two kinds of, one is like commercial capital, where you make money, a return on investment, and et cetera, or it's patient capital, where you actually wait and see how it works, and then you quantify the impact and you quantify the return on investment. So at this stage, in the ecosystem of social enterprise, in Pakistan, it's still wait and see. There are very few who have actually gained that traction in which they have accessed really established distribution networks. The examples of Grameen and M-Pesa. Why M-Pesa is such a phenomenal model? Because 65% of Kenya's GDP is transacted on M-Pesa. So once you determine or demonstrate the value, the money is there. But yes, as investors, social impact investors are more reluctant and very careful in investing in such enterprises. Second bit is quantification, like you said, you know, the accounting and the legal formats, they're not that evolved. They need to have metrics indigenous to the communities or regions rather than one generic ones. That's what, at this point of time, the US methodology or the European and the British methodology is trying to come out with. But you need to actually have indigenous methodology of quantifying impact with return. And these problems would exist, not problems, but challenges before a strong validation of a proof of concept would come and change the landscape to a particular extent. So your question was the most lengthiest one. Any more questions? Thank you so much. I once again would like to thank Mr. Khalid Awan and Professor Francis Davis for actually sharing their insights. And it was a very learning experience for me personally. And once again, thank you to USFR and Natural Forum for giving us the opportunity. Thank you so much.
And thank you all for being there. Allow us to show our appreciation for your presence and for your conversation by giving you a token of the appreciation. Let me invite to make the presentation Talib S. Karim, President of the Institute of Business Management, and Dr. Farooq Iqbal, Dean and Director of the Institute of Business Administration. Gentlemen, if you could please join us on the stage. If I could first ask Talib Karim to make a presentation to Professor Davis and to Khalid Awan. And Dr. Iqbal, if you would make the presentation to Faraz Khan, please, that would be fantastic. And Asfar, if you might join us up on the stage for the group photograph. Is Asfar with us? He's not. Okay. We'll take the group photo anyway. And all together, if you would, gents, for a quick groupie. Okay. Fantastic. Folks, once again, please, a round of applause for our panel this afternoon. Our next